Wow, this is exciting. Start a new Masechet, Sotah. And the pasuk in Naso, in Bamidbar, hey, ish ki tiste ishto umala bamal v'nela me'ene isha v'nistaravi nitma'a v'eid ein ba v'hilo nisfasa v'avar aleha v'avar alav ruach kina v'kines ishto v'hi nitma'a o avar alav ruach kina v'kines ishto v'hi lo nitma'a v'hevi ha'ish es ishto lakohen. So we have here a Baal, and he's suspicious of his wife. She's been too friendly with other men, and sometimes she even goes into a private place with them. He suspects that maybe she's guilty of some sort of adultery, and therefore he warns her, and he gives her a kini and tells her not to go into a private place with so and so. She violated his warning, and she went into a private place secluded with that person. And there was enough time there for the act to have been performed there. And now we need a bedika b'mayim amorim, which took place in the Beis Hamikdash. As long as she's not nivdaka, then she's asura al baila. The Mishnah says, hamakane li ishto, if he gives her kinui, that means he warns her that she shouldn't go into a secluded place with a certain individual, because the husband suspects that they are doing what they shouldn't be doing. Rabbi Eliezer Omer makani la al pi shnayim. He needs two witnesses to warn her, and without those witnesses, he's not believed to say that he warned her and he gave her kinui, and there won't be any hashkas Sotah to check her out. And if there was no bedika in front of two edim, then and there was no kinui in front of two edim, then there's no kinui at all, and therefore she would not be asur al baila if she violated that kinui that he gave her without the presence of edim, and she went into a secluded place with so and so. She's still muteras al baila. Umashkal pi eid echad or al pi atzmo. Now we get to stira. Until now we discussed kinui. That's the first stage in the process. Now we get to the second stage, where she went into a private place, and we only have one witness to testify that she violated the kinui and went into that secluded place with so and so. Or even in the absence of one aid, if the Baal himself says, I saw that she went into a private place with that so and so after I gave her kinui, and that's enough to be considered a stira, which again, as we said before, would number one, generate an Israel baila, and number two, require hashkas sotah. Rabbi Yeshua disagrees. Omer, mekane la alpi shnaim. I agree with you that the kinui requires the presence of two witnesses, but not only that, umashka alpi shnaim, even the stira, which will ultimately lead to her being mashke, that also requires two witnesses. The Mishnah continues, and this is true according to both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. We'll soon see in the Gemara a dissenting view, but as far as our Mishnah is concerned, it's unanimously accepted that kinui has to take place b'fnei shnei edim. And now the problem is, al tidabri im ish ploni. He didn't say that she shouldn't go into a private place with so and so. He just said, don't talk to that person. And she violated his hasra. This is not considered a stira that generates an Israel baila. And for the same matter, if she's an Ashes Kohen, muteres lechol betruma, this is not considered a stira, or shall we say a kinui and a stira, to prohibit her from eating truma. But if on the other hand, he warned her not to go into a private place with so-and-so, and she in fact did, and violated his kinui with a stira, and she went into a secluded area, v'shasa kedei tuma, and she was there with that man for the amount of time that it's roy labia, is asura lebesa Asura lechal b'truma. She no longer could live with her husband, and if she's married to a Kohen, she can no longer eat truma until she can exonerate herself by proving that she was innocent if she drinks and survives the Meimrorim. The mace, if the husband dies and there are no children left from that marriage, he has not yet gotten a chance to bring her to the Beis Hamikdash to be mashka. Choletzes v'lo misyabemes. There's a suffix situation here. Maybe she's muteres l'baila. Maybe she was not guilty of this crime, and therefore she's kukoliyibu. And of course, there's an isavation samesa chutz lizar. She cannot marry anyone in the world until she gets chalitza. V'lo misyabemes. But on the other hand, we can't allow for yibu because perhaps she did have that be'ila to another man. She violated the steer and she was asur al baila. And if she's asur al baila, then the ishus is not a full-fledged ishus. And now with the death of her husband, that ishus is not enough to create and generate a zika, and she doesn't fall for yibu, but she does need chalitz on the side that maybe she was innocent and she was muteres lebaila. The Gemara raises the following question. Michdi, Tanami Nazir Solek. The last Masechet that we learned before we started Sotah was Nazir. It seems like ages ago, but we made us see him just yesterday in Nazir. And my Tana de Katana Sotah, why did let's call it Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he organized the Mishnayos, why did he organize Sotah exactly after Nazir? And the Gemara answers Kidder Rebbe. Very famous statement of Rebbe that we know already from Rashi al Torah. And that is the Sanya Rabbi Omer Loma Nismecha Parshas Nazir Le Parshas Sotah. So we have in Naso, in Perek Hey, and we're talking towards the beginning of the Perek, the Torah presents the story of the Nazir, and then immediately afterwards, the Parsha of Sotah. Loma Lecha, this teaches us a kol haroa Sotah b'kilkula Yazir atzmo minayayin. As if to say that if a person sees what happens to a sota, we'll see what the word kilkula means, then he should realize that yayin was the cause of the znus. She lost her control because she drank yayin, and therefore he should accept upon himself nazirus. Now, what does it mean b'kilkula? B'nivula u'beboshta. What does that mean? Well, first of all, in the process of her drinking the meimarorim, they rip her garments, they expose her hair, and they tie a rope around above her chest. And this is all a busha and a nivul. And therefore, he should, realizing what yayin, how powerful of a tool it is and what it could lead to and the terrible things, therefore he should accept upon himself nizirus. Now this Gemara of Rebbe would seem to reflect one of two shittas about whether nizirus is a good thing. Because if you recall, there are those who are opposed to accepting upon yourselves. But maybe in this case, everybody would agree he sees the impact of yayin in a negative sense, and therefore he should take upon himself a neder of nazirus. So Gemara asks for listening Sotah v'hada, listening nazir. After all, if we're following the Seder HaMikros, then, I'm sorry, the other way around. If we're following the logical sequence, that he sees as Sotah and then he accepts upon himself Nazirus, then in the Mikra, Sotah should have come first and afterwards Nazir. Because that would have been a more appropriate sequence. Now the Gemara wants to explain something else. And that is, why is it that in the Seder HaMasechtos, at the beginning of Seder Noshim, we have ksubis, And only after that we have Nidarim, Sotah, and Nazir. And the Gemara says that Adi the Tana Ksubis, Rebbe organized the Mishnayos, the Masechet of Ksubis, V'Tana Hamadir, and he has a parak about Nidarim in Masechet Ksubis, because Masechet Ksubis is all about Ishus and the relationship between a husband and a wife. And therefore, if she takes Nidarim, then he could be made for a Nidarim in the context of that relationship. Is Tana Nidarim, so that's why Masechet Nidarim comes after Ksubis. The Aili, the Tani Nidarim, Tani Nazir. And that's why Nazir comes after Nidarim. And you asked me the question, why did Rebbe organize Nazir before Sotah? And the answer is, even though logically he saw the Sotah and then he was Makabel Nazir, so Sotah should have come first, but the answer is that Nazir is going to come first, because Nazir is sort of a tag on to Nidarim, to Domin and Nidarim, because Nazirus is generated when he takes a neder that he's going to be a Nazir. Uktani Sotah Rebbe, and therefore to make that connection in which Sotah is contiguous to Nazir, to reflect the understanding of Rebbe as to why the Smichsa Parshis is between Nazir and Sotah. Now the Gemara is medayek from the Lashon of the Mishnah that a person should really not, if all things are equal, he should not warn his wife with a kinu. Hamakane, di'evid in lechatchila lo. Lechatchila, it's not a good idea to give kinu to your wife. You should be careful about what you say to your wife, especially if Bisman Hazed is not even Meimurorim. So she'll be Asur al Bail if she violates your kinui, and you can't even be matir that Isur by taking her to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, how does the Gemara know that the word Amakane means B'di'evet? Apparently, if the Mishnah would have wanted to indicate that a person is being encouraged, even lechatchila, to give kinui, then it should have said makane. It shouldn't have said hamakane. The difference between makane and hamakane is that makane is mashma like an imperative. Go ahead and give kinui. Makane, a person should give kinui. But hamakane refers to that person who went ahead and was makane, but he shouldn't have done so because chatchilu we don't want to do so, and that's to be discouraged because savatana didan also likanos. So the extra hey in our Mishnah in the word hamakane is reflective of the fact that the Tanav Mishnah holds also likanos. A person is enjoined from being makane's wife because, as we said before, every time he's makane's wife, number one, he's creating a certain ava between he and his wife that he suspects her, and he's also going to cause her this nivel and this busha that we spoke about before. And furthermore, if she violates his kinui, she becomes asur al baila until meimurorim. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, he have a pasuk where Lakish Sotah, when Rish Lakish used to start his presentation of Masechet Sotah, Omar Hachi, this is what he said: Ein mezavgin lo yodam isha elufi masa. When a person gets a zivug from Shamayim, then he should realize that it is a zivug that reflects the fact that if he's a tzaddik, he'll get a wife who's an isha tznuah. If he's a rasha, he'll get a prutza. Shenemar ki lo yanuach shevet harasha al gorel hatzadikim. Passing in Tilim, that a person should not be mizdaveg with a shilton Russia, bigorolo shel tzaddik. So he has here a commentary in which he says that the word shevet, which is a rod or a staff, is a remez to srora and shilton. And the Gemara in Horios, he quotes Shevet Yehuda, that's the Rosh HaGola, Shebavel Sherodes Ha'am B'Makir. Ve'ah Isha, Yesh la shilton bebeisa. And she has a shilton in her home. So the pasuk is sort of a divine promise, a divine guarantee that a tzaddik will not find that in his fate he will be located and controlled by a Memsheles Russia, Memsheles Shilton Russia. Now he says that sometimes a shevet, a rod, will help a person by supporting him, and so too in zivug, sometimes a wife will stand there on the husband's side to encourage him, to help him. Other times she's kenegdo, and then she's called a shevet of Russia. Omar Rav Baruchan Rab Yoch, we have a kasha here, because in the drasha of Reish Lakish, based on the Pasuk in Tehillim, it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mezavik zivugim lefi maisav. But Rabbi Bar Bachana, the name of Yochanan, says kashim lezavgan kikriyas yamsuf, to make a zivug, and that has to be lefi maiseh ha'adam. That has to reflect him and her having a both. He's a tzaddik and she's a tznuah. Is kriyas yamsuf. That's very difficult to change the entire state of Bereshis. Shenemar, with regard to David HaMelech's Tehillim in praising the Almighty, he says, Elokim, Moshiv Yechidim Baisa, Motzi Asirim B'Kosharos. Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mezavig a man with a woman, because each one of them are Yechidim, they're alone, and each one is living in their father's house. And Hashem sort of seats them down, so to speak, or settles them down in a bayis. And he took Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim in a Chodesh Kosher. That's Chodesh Nisan, right? Why is Nisan called a Chodesh Kosher? Because in these parts of the world, there's no heavy sun and no fierce cold and rains, which again, in our situation today, is not so accurate. But this is a very exceptional kind of winter here. And for the fact that Pasuk equates Zivug Ish ve'Isha to Yetzias Mitzrayim, both of them are equal in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it seems that although the Zivug is a reflection of Maaseh HaAdam, he is a tzaddik and she is a tznuah, but nevertheless, it's a kriyas yamsuf to get together two people on that level that are equal and will make a great marriage. So Gemara Saini, is it true that the zivug is based on the maaseh tzaddik, the maaseh of a tznuah? V'amar Rav Yehuda Marav Harboim Yom Kol Yitzias Avlad Baskel Yotzis Vomeres Basploni Luploni Basploni Luploni. So the Ploni Luploni. It's already predetermined, even before the Vlad is born, that they will be married off to so-and-so. I mean, if it's before later Sa'adam, then you can't know whether it's a Russia or a Tzaddik. I mean, so how could Reish Lakish say that the Zivug is determined which man will be married to whom based on Ma'asav Shalodam when it says there's a Baskol even before the child is born? Lo kasha hab zivug rishon v'hab zivug sheni. When Rav said that a Baskol goes out, he was referring to zivug rishon. And here we have a comment of Rashi, and the Maratz Chiyus even expands on this, that the Zivug Rishon is based on Mazel, not on Maisim, but on Mazel. Again, the Gemara Tzchayis also points out the Gemara at the end of Shabbos says Ein Mazel B'Yisrael, so this is a little bit difficult. But be that as it may, when did Reish Lakish say that Zivug is determined not by Mazel but rather by Ma'aseh Adam? That's B'Zivug Sheni. Okay, now we finish the Agadita, and we begin the basic sugya for today. Do we need two Eidim for stira? And on that, the Mishnah had recorded Machlok Shin Rabbi Eliezer, who requires two Eidim. I'm sorry. Rabbi Eliezer requires two Eidim for Kinui, but not for stira. And Rabbi Yeshua says that we need two Eidim not only for Kinui, but also for stira. So Rabbi Eliezer only Mekanila al Pishnaim. Only the Kinui requires two Eidim and not the stira. So we're going to see later on that the Gemara is going to go into an extensive analysis as to which is more chamur, or which plays a greater role. Is it the kinui or the stira? Because we would say l'chora certainly it's the stira. I mean that's where she began her znus, if she's guilty. But yet there's no stira without a kinui. So kinui sort of is the prerequisite and the bottom foundation that facilitates a stira. But in Rabbi Eliezer's frame of reference, it would seem that kinui is more important than stira. Or can we say it the other way around, that maybe according to Rabbi Eliezer, we have to be more machmir with regard to stira, because that's really where the guilt is all about. The violation is there for 1 aid is enough. And you don't need 2 aid. Ad kan lo pligi el bekinu ubestira. In other words, with regard to kinui, everyone agrees that you need 2 aid. With regard to stira, according to Rabbi Yeshua, you need 2 aid. Aval tuma, the actual maises nus is eid echad mehema. If there's edus on this nus, everybody seems to assume that eid echad is believed. And apparently, the Gemara is operating with the principle of eid echad nem bisurim. So we accept and rely on the edus of 1 aid to testify that she had bia. And therefore we're not mashka. Because hashkas sotah only applies when there's a suffix, but here, as a result of the testimony of 1 aid, it's no longer a suffix. And of course, she's asur al bailim psulim and akuna. Mitruma. So the bottom line of this whole sugya now is that with regard to Tumah, 1 aid is sufficient. And if a single witness testifies to the effect that she had that relationship, that illicit relationship, then number 1, there's no longer Ashkas Sotah. Number 2, she's Asur Bailam Psulim and Aktru. Utnan Nami. The Gemara now brings a Mishnah from later on in Sotah, Daf Lamed Aleph, to prove that as far as Tumah is concerned, 1 aid is believed. Eid echad omer anira isi shenitmes, in that stira, and again there were 2 aidim for the stira, because we're going according to Rabbi Yeshua now, is he's believed. 1 witness is believed to say that she had that relationship. And therefore, lo haisa shosa, she will not shrink for the Meimorah, because as we said before, that's only in a suffix, and now we have a vade, because the Torah relies on 1 witness. How do we know that 1 aid is reliable on Tumah after Kini V'Stira? The Gemara later on is going to give an explanation of why this is so, and we should rely on 1 aid. But now the Gemara wants to know, where's the source for this? The Tanur Rabbanan. We learned in a Brisa, in the Parsha of Sotah, it says, V'eid ein ba, v'hi lo nitfasa. Let's go back and read the end of the pasuk here. It says, "V'shachav ish osa shechazor v'nalam yeinei isha v'nisravi nitma'a v'eid ein ba v'hilo nitfasa." And what's the next pasuk? V'yover aleh ruakin, etc., etc., and v'hinitma. So the Brisa dashes v'eid ein ba. What does that mean? Bishnayim hakasu medaber. When the pasuk uses the word aid, it means two aidim. That sounds very strange to our eyes, but the Gemara is going to derive this from another pasuk in Tvarim Yutes. So, in other words, the Torah is saying that there are no two aidim to testify about Hatuma, and yet the Torah is saying she's asura because lo nitfasa. So it means that she's asura based on a testimony which is less than two aidim, which would be one aid. Oh, Eno, the Brisa asks, Ela afilu bi'echad. Maybe what the Torah is saying, the aid ain ba, means there's not even one aid. There are no aidim. But it could be that enochinami you require two aidim. So now prove to me that the word aid, if it doesn't say aid echad, it just says aid, that's referring to two aidim. So aid means a cat, a reliable package or unit of aidus. So the Bryce asks, so Eino el afil bi'echad. Talmud lomalo yakum aid echad bish. How do we know that the word aid means shnayim? I'm sorry. How do we know that the word aid means echad? Sorry. How do we know that the word aid means shnayim? Because the Torah, when aid means one, adds the word echad. As we see in the parsha of Lo Yakum Eid Echad B'ish, and there's an extra word echad. It could have said Lo Yakum Eid B'ish. So it's telling me something about the word aid when there's no qualification of aid echad. If the Torah doesn't add the word echad, then we interpret aid to mean two aidim. And it's only when it says aid echad, then we know that we're talking about one witness. So the Torah has to be very specific and say aid echad. Otherwise, the word aid means shnayim.